guys, it's Mindi Linscombe here at the Something New show where we like to learn how to live a life worth celebrating. And I'm so honored to have our special guest with us today. We're here in the bridal shop at the Something New studios. She has flown in all the way from Miami. Please welcome Alyse.
Thank you so much.
I love it. Alyse, can you pronounce your last name for us?
Gaulin.
Alyse Gaulin. I didn't want to mess it up. And let me do a quick bio so you know how special she is. And she traveled so far to be with us in person, which I'm so lucky that she did. But she is the CEO of Own It Coaching. Alyse comes from a wealth of experience after helping grow multi-billion-dollar corporations in the retail industry, most recently as an executive at Christian Louboutin, and she was actually the VP of Business Strategy. Love that, and after working her way up the corporate structure, she knew in her heart that she was an entrepreneur with a passion to change people's lives. So Alyse and her husband founded a health and wellness company called Own It Coaching, where they help professional athletes and 8, 9, and 10-figure entrepreneurs understand how to optimize their health. So welcome, Alyse. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, and all the way in Colorado. Thanks for leaving your warm neighborhood to join.
Very warm.
I know. And she brought her amazing animal, her third family member, right?
Yeah.
And you want to tell us what kind of dog you have?
Yeah, he's a Cavapoo. He's, in my humble opinion, the cutest dog out there.
Yes. Well, I love him too because I'm a major dog person. So I was so glad to see that you brought your third family member here with us. Can you start out by just telling us how long ago did you leave the corporate world to start Own It?
Yeah, so it's been a little over 2 years now.
And was that a little intimidating at first? Tell us about that.
It was really intimidating. I like to say it was the time of my life where I feel like the bottom dropped out from under me. So people who know me well know that I'm not somebody who likes a ton of change. I like routine. I like stability. Anytime I've changed to a new job, I've always felt a lot of stress and pressure that comes with that. But this was a completely different animal because I wasn't just changing. I wasn't just going to a new company, right? I was changing everything about my life. And I did it in a way where I didn't just leave an industry which I had known for the past 13 years. I left the city I had known for the last 13 years.
You were living in New York, right?
I was living in New York City, in Manhattan. Yep. And I changed everything all at once. I got engaged that year. It was a year of a lot of change. I thought I was preparing myself. I thought I did a really good job of preparing myself. So the way that I left, Louboutin was it was a diamond in the rough. It was an amazing company to work for. And it was one of those companies. One of the things that I loved about it the most was it was women supporting women. A lot of times in the retail industry, it can be very, very opposite. And I know
cutthroat.
Exactly. And we've talked about it. You've done an amazing job of building a very similar culture of women building up women. So it was just so refreshing to be a part of a team like that. So anyways, when I decided to leave, my boss, she was the president of the company. She knew that I was probably going to be making a change. She knew I was going to be going on to something completely different. So I actually ended up giving them 6 months notice.
Wow.
And it was for them, but it was also a lot for me. Because I'm not, like I said, I'm not somebody who is just like, okay, make a decision, let's go.
2 weeks later,
right?
I'm gone. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, I got this, right? And I started shifting my schedule. I started shifting my daily routine. I started shifting, the spending certain days with only Own It days versus Louboutin days. And so by the time I actually made the transition, in my mind, I thought, oh no, I've got this. I'm going to be fine. Like this will be a really smooth transition. I've been making the transition for 6 months. My first week without Louboutin, my first week as just a full entrepreneur as the CEO of Own It Coaching, I completely lost my identity. The bottom dropped out from under me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Even though you chose this path, like
Yes.
It wasn't like somebody chose it for you. You're like, this is what I really want.
Exactly.
But you still felt lost.
I felt lost because here's the thing. I decided when I was 13 years old that I wanted to be a shoe buyer living in New York City. And I basically made it to the ultimate shoe company, living in New York City, going to Paris every other month. It was an amazing job. But as you can imagine, I started to build that identity from the age of 13. everything that I did, through my experience in college and internships and, all of my entire experience leading up to that was all about fashion, New York. And the bottom completely dropped from under me when I left that. And I was like, I don't know who I am anymore. I'm somebody who is really confident in who I am. And I would be getting on phone calls and I was like, I have zero confidence walking into this meeting. I don't know who I am. And my now husband, he was my fiance at the time, was like, where did you go?
Wow. So what did you do to climb out of that? Like, how did you start to leave that, low spot? Because when I know you now, what I know of you is just this amazing CEO of your coaching company. But I'm just thinking, what were some of the behaviors you had to do in that transition to kind of get back to where you were?
That's a great question. And it's actually one of the key modalities in our business today, because ultimately we help the whole human, and it's about spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical well-being. It's not just a physical, holistic wellness approach that we have. And so, now, although it was a really difficult time when I was going through it, now I see it as a gift, because it allowed me to really dive into the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual components of myself. I'm somebody who's had a therapist for the last 10, 12 years, which has been an amazing experience. But, I kind of scaled back on that. So I scaled up on that again, met more regularly with my therapist, who is somebody who knows me very well and who's been with me for years. That was one thing. But I also know that wasn't enough. I needed to do not only the deep work, but I also needed to start to create the behavior change on top of it. So I actually got a coach who was...
what kind of a coach? Like a life coach? Or what would you say?
Life coach, I think, is a really tricky word.
Right.
Anybody can be a life coach nowadays.
That's true, without any certification.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So what kind of coach did you find, or what did you do to find that person?
Yeah, so I went through a program myself, which is rooted in cognitive behavioral therapy. However, the main goal is all about changing your behaviors to take action and to change your life, right? Therapy is amazing because it allows you to do the really deep-seated work. It allows you to go back, sort through the trauma, because we all have our own version of trauma, right? But when you have a coach who can do that, but then also help you create the change within your life and the behaviors that you need to change that is there, but you're so stuck on. I worked with somebody who was rooted in that cognitive behavioral therapy space. And so in doing so, this was probably a good 8 months of really, really hard work of looking at myself in the mirror saying, why did the bottom drop out from underneath me? And ultimately realizing it was a spiritual thing for me. That was the biggest thing, is I needed to find something greater than myself. And that was when I started to turn back towards my relationship with God. For a while, I had been turned away from that. And in doing so, it really allowed me to approach life through a completely new lens, having not only all of these amazing mindset tools of, okay, this is coming up, I'm getting triggered in this area, here's what I do, A, B, C, because I've been through this, now this is just practice.
You recognize it.
Exactly. I have the awareness of this is why I'm being triggered, and so now here's an opportunity for me to practice, to actually show up differently.
Can you give me an example of one of those things?
Yeah. So let's take, for example, showing up to a meeting that I may feel nervous for. Maybe it's with a potential partner or, with an advisor or somebody that again, in my old life, would have zero problem
I was going to say, for those of you that don't know, here you are, boss babe in New York City, like, you probably run those meetings in your sleep because you've been doing it for so long. And now you're like, hey, I am on the other side of the table now.
Yep.
And I'm looking for partnerships or great opportunities. And so I just wanted to set the stage. So you're walking into a meeting now as the CEO of a different company.
Yep.
And how do you feel?
So I'm feeling, and again, this is during that time where I say I felt like the bottom dropped out from underneath me. So I have the awareness, okay, there's something coming up, there's a trigger. when I'm showing up to a meeting where I don't feel confident. It goes back to that entire, like, the whole confidence piece.
Yeah.
And so as a result, I say, okay, there's a lack of belief in my confidence.
Wow.
So I see that as a trigger to actually shift my belief. And so what I would do is put together, for a certain situation like this, put together a new mantra or something new I would tell myself. It's essentially a new belief I would put in place of that. So you've got this, or you have no problem doing this, or you're the most powerful person in that room. One of those new beliefs that I can put on in that moment that I can now step into and say, no. That is not who I am. I am not somebody who lacks confidence. I'm not somebody who is giving away my power. I am somebody who is actually in full possession of my power. And if I can step into that person, again, taking 5 minutes before I'm about to walk into this meeting, take that 5 minutes to really just breathe into that, to sit into that, to pray into that, then I can show up as that powerful person.
Did you have those statements written down anywhere where you were like reflecting on them and in those 5 minutes, or or were you just recalling those statements, or?
So it was a combination of things. I have actually a statement I still set as a reminder in my phone that pops up at 12:05 every single day.
Are you okay to share?
I don't, it's kind of longer. I don't have the whole thing, but I can share like a version of it.
Yeah. Like, give me the what do you see in a summary at 12:05 every day?
Yeah. So essentially what it says is, I am the co-creator of my life with God. I trust in who I am. I trust in my power. And when I do that, I have full ownership of my life. And I can step into that power that I know I possess.
Every day, an alarm goes off on your phone at 12:05, and you read that.
Yep.
And does it kind of recenter you right in the middle of all those meetings, all the to-do lists?
It does.
Like right there in the middle.
It does. And it's a good reminder for me to just step back into my power. Even if, we all have bad days, right? Even if it's one of those days, it's really powerful on a day like that where it's like, all right, that's who I am.
Wow. I'm sure there's a bunch of listeners that are thinking, what should my statements be? And we've been through similar counseling where it does do some very good, where you write out all the, I would say, ungodly beliefs about yourself. And then how do you change those into godly beliefs, or for people that aren't in a faith atmosphere, but something that's more true to yourself than the untruth that you're reading.
Absolutely.
And believing.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really important to constantly change your mindset. I actually heard somewhere the last couple of weeks, and I've been telling my kids that you have 30 seconds to change a belief about, like, if you say something about yourself that's not true or negative or whatever, that your body actually believes it when you say those things. And so you have 30 seconds to reframe that verbiage or change it to the truth or whatever it may be before your body believes. And so I think that's really important. As my kids, they can be very negative about themselves. They're growing up, they're still in that, changing their mindset, learning how to use their mindset. But I just think, hey, you have 30 seconds, say that again.
Yep.
Change it to what you actually do believe about yourself.
Yep.
Or about your friend that
Absolutely.
you're talking about. And so it's good because it's not really human to think we're going to always be thinking the positive things. We're human. Mm-hmm. So we're going to naturally go to negative, right? We make mistakes and we're going to go to the hard negative. And so I think it's really good to know, but even if we do, we have time to reassociate to the truth statement. So
absolutely.
I think that's really cool.
Yeah. And I think if I could go a level deeper on that, because you're right, it is, the awareness is key. If you don't have awareness, I like to say all the time, if you don't have awareness, then you don't have anything. You're not going to be changing the behavior or the thought or whatever it is.
Right.
Because you have to start with being able to look at yourself and say, oh, wow, there's something coming up there. Once you have the awareness, there's kind of 3 key steps. You have the belief, right, which is the deep-seated thing that I would say comfortably 70% of people on this planet are walking around not knowing what they truly believe and hold to be true about themselves.
I agree.
So you have the core belief, and that belief dictates our thoughts, our feelings, and ultimately it dictates how we show up in this world. So if you have somebody who's showing up like me, when my belief was, I'm not good enough, I don't have enough confidence, I'm going to show up really meek in this meeting, then I am going to show up quiet. I'm probably not going to interject. I'm not going to share what I know is a really powerful part of me. I am an amazing business strategist. It's what I am gifted with. So if I'm showing up out of that ungodly belief, like you said, then I'm giving away my power. However, if I can step into, once I have that awareness to actually shift that, then my thoughts about myself change, my feelings, which is probably one of the even more important things about myself, changes, and ultimately the way that I show up changes. So when I walk into that meeting, I'm showing up powerful. I'm going to be adding to the conversation. I'm going to be driving strategy. I'm going to be talking about next steps. I'm going to be figuring out where potentially a really amazing partnership could go. And that's the difference between an extra $500,000 this year.
Yeah.
Is being able to show up more powerfully in that meeting.
Absolutely. That's so cool. What would you say is, like, now you're a couple years into this role and I can tell you're really loving it. What would you say maybe some of the parts of your job that you're surprised by the fact that you enjoy this, that you weren't able to do necessarily in the corporate world, but as an entrepreneur, as the CEO, that you're able to do now? What are some things that you're like, oh, I really enjoy this, wasn't expecting that, but now that I've started my own thing, this is something I love?
Yeah, I love that question. So I think one of the main things is driving strategy. So obviously, in my previous role, I was highly, highly involved in the strategy, but I reported to somebody. I didn't have a final say. Right? You work for a company, and ultimately there's a bureaucracy at play.
Yeah.
Now being the CEO of our own company, I would say it feels very, very different. And it was not something I expected, because I knew what it felt like to lead a team, to be entrepreneurial in nature, but you still kind of have that catch-all when you work for a company, right?
Yeah.
When you are in the driver's seat, you are fully betting and depending on yourself. That was one of the things that really intimidated me, taking this massive leap into the entrepreneurial world.
Yeah, it's like it's on you.
It's on you. It is absolutely on you. And so I think although it can be intimidating, it's also been one of the most exciting things. Is not only is it on me to make sure I'm showing up for my team and make sure I'm showing up for my clients and make sure I'm showing up for my husband, who's my partner in the business, but it's also, I get to do this. I get to do this every day. I get to decide what Own It coaching looks like. I get to figure out what we're doing 3, 6, 9 months from now, 1 year, 5 years from now. I get to be able to decide and figure out what that direction looks like. And that was something I didn't realize gave me such motivation and confidence.
That's awesome. Well, I just love being an entrepreneur too. Just the correlation of the harder you work and the more you invest in something, you can actually see the fruit of it. Even if it is 5 years from now, there's this really beautiful thing to say, oh, something I created actually was able to be fruitful and multiplied.
Absolutely.
So that's pretty cool.
I know.
Okay, something we have in common that I think we connected about is just owning a company with our husbands.
Yes.
So I want you to tell me, how has that been for you, Alyse? The everything. Tell me how it is owning a company with somebody who, like me, is totally opposite of yourself. I mean, you have similar values and everything, but personality-wise, we're not necessarily married to someone that's just like us. And so how has that been working with Justin, who I'm excited he'll be in an episode soon. So tell me about that.
It's really hard. Really hard. I'm just going to be super honest. It's really, really hard.
Yes.
The first year was the hardest. Reason being, we almost had to create a completely new relationship. We had to figure out, yes, we had been together for 4 or 5 years at that point in our relationship. But we had to figure out, okay, now that we have this thing that's really good, but we introduce a completely new element into the relationship, we had to define what this work relationship looked like. I came from a background where I had a really strong work-life balance. So I had a really strong sense of boundaries. Whereas Justin is somebody who's could work 24/7. And so that was the one thing that was really, really difficult for us, was we had to figure out, okay, how do we meet in the middle where we're not working 24/7? Because
you can start to talk about it at dinner, at bedtime, in the morning. Oh, I have this idea. You just constantly,
everywhere.
all the time, you can be thinking about it.
Everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah. Even last night, it was our 1 year anniversary yesterday.
Happy anniversary, by the way. Yes.
we're sitting at this beautiful restaurant at the Broadmoor Hotel, and all of a sudden up pops a work conversation, and we had to catch ourselves being like, no, okay, great, let's wrap this up and let's go back to life again, right? It still happens today. It's definitely still a thing, but I think finding those boundaries and finding that space of here's where life begins and work ends. But I think for him, that's what we had to figure out was a little sense of boundaries, and I had to figure out how to be more flexible, right? If on a Saturday morning something comes up, yeah, go ahead, go take the phone call, or even for myself, right? Something comes up
As an opportunity, because as an entrepreneur, you definitely don't want to lose that moment. If that's the only moment that opportunity comes along, you want to say, okay, I'm going to jump at it. I totally understand.
Yep.
But you do have to be flexible. And how did you decide, okay, whose role is what? Was there just a conversation one day, or were you like, okay, this is clearly your skill set, this is clearly mine, or did you do an assessment? Like, how did you decide who was going to do what in the company?
That was never a question. That was the easiest part for us.
Okay.
Because we are so different in how we operate. So with Justin, the way that it kind of, in the beginning, it was really just the two of us. So he did everything forward facing. So he did all of the social media branding. He did all of the networking and marketing to bring in new clients. He did all of the business development. Whereas for me, I was the CEO role is what really made sense. I did all of the recruiting a team, putting SOPs in place, figuring out what our curriculum looked like, figuring out how we would operate in a lot of ways. And so it was really easy for us to kind of divide those two areas in which we were both really good at. I don't really ever recall us both grabbing onto something and saying, no, this is mine, this is mine. It always was it fell very naturally.
And then with that, do you give complete liberty for decision-making in your categories, or are there moments where you're like, hey, I just want to double check, or like you ask him, hey, double check me on that before, like, is there any sort of crossover before making a final decision?
We make all big decisions together. So today we've kind of figured out what our flow feels like, but we talk every single week. We have a standing meeting for any big decisions or any of that kind of stuff. Another thing that's been really helpful that we've recently implemented is a daily wind down. So what we were finding is, yes, we had the hard boundary of this is where we're not in front of our computers, but the work conversation would roll over into dinner. So what we've started doing is like a 15, 20-minute wind down conversation at the end of every day where we can process some of those things that may have come up within the day, so that it allows us to be ourselves in just, our life relationship for the evening.
Oh, I think that's so important. Actually, something we do here at Something New as well. It's called we huddle up and then we huddle down. So at the beginning of every day, actually, I think right behind me, my girls are about to do a huddle up, where they're going to discuss the day, the plan, the goals. From sales goals to follow-up to any sort of marketing things that we have coming up or whatever. We'll go over the goals and the plan, but then we kind of divide and conquer for about 8 hours. And we joke about it, but we're like, we'll see you at 8 or whatever, what time the store closes. But we huddle down, and the whole point of that is to make sure that we wrap up any sort of loose ends or communication so that we don't go home and continue texting each other or reminding each other, hey, don't forget tomorrow. We already huddled down, and then we literally close it up. Physically with our hands, we wrap it up.
I love that.
And then it's kind of like, okay, that was the end. We are now off duty. We're going to go be with our families and enjoy them. So I love that.
Yeah.
It's important to do.
It is. It really is. And it's taken our relationship to a whole new level in a good way.
So what are the things that you forced yourself to talk about if you're not talking about own it? Because now I'm like, okay, give me some tips in your relationship. What are some things you're like, okay, let's talk about this? What are some non-work related topics? Because I'm sure there's some entrepreneur couples here that they are like us, where it's really hard to not keep talking about work. Mm-hmm. So are there some go-to topics that you like to bring up outside of work?
Every night we do high, low, and buffalo. So what was your high of the day? What was your low of the day? And what was your buffalo? What was something that surprised you today?
High, low, and buffalo. I haven't heard that one. I love it. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and that oftentimes creates good conversation, right? And yes, it can go back to things that happen in our day that may be work related, but we're talking about it from our experience, not necessarily like, oh, this happened, we need to make a decision and talk about it. It's a very different thing. It's like, you know, like a husband and wife or a couple coming home to each other at the end of the day who do not work together at all, right? They're in completely separate offices, completely separate industries. We approach it through that lens, right? Like, let's assume we're not in the same business. How did your day go? Right? Because that's what a lot of couples talk about at the end of the day. So when we do our high, low in Buffalo, we come at it from that lens, not necessarily of, oh yeah, this happened. Let's make these decisions today this evening while we're at the dinner table.
Right,
so that's
right.
one thing. Another thing is we have 100 questions on our refrigerator for topics, like conversation starters. One of them, let me think of an example of a recent one. One of them was if you had all resources taken care of, what would you be doing every single day of your life? So it's deep questions. And that's something that I really appreciate about Justin and I is we go deep. We do the deep work together. And so whether it's through the high-low Buffalo or whether it's through some of these questions, it allows us to get to know one another a little bit deeper every single day.
And where do you fit in outside friendships?
Outside friendships, that's a big one for me. So one of the things that we do every year is we put the big rocks in place. And so that means like Justin and I do a quarterly trip, the two of us. But it also means, you know, if there's any weddings or any events that we need to plug in. And for me, another big one is making sure I'm creating space and time for those relationships. So I'm actually coming back out here in 4 weeks to see a girlfriend who lives in Denver. So there's a lot of and then of course there's things that pop up throughout the year as well that may not be as planned because not everybody plans their entire year like, you know, crazy entrepreneurs do.
Yeah. Like, I know.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
But the things that we know we do put in place. And then I'm somebody who's just very organic in the way that I do maintain my relationships. So in my evenings, you know, Justin and I, if we break up the week, I have a night to myself. So oftentimes during that time, I will call one of my friends to just catch up and say, hey, how are you doing?
Which I wanted to say, like, that means that not all of your close friends are local. And
None of them are.
Okay, I just want to bring that to people's attention because I think a lot of us think falsely that our close friends have to be in town with us. But it's a totally unrealistic expectation to think that the people that you have the most in common with are going to all live near you.
Right.
It's not true.
It's not.
They could be all across the country or world for that matter. So I love that you said that because I was curious if you were going to share that a lot of your close friends are not right around the corner.
Yeah. No, they're not. It has to be we either have to travel to see one another or doing a FaceTime phone call.
Yeah. But it's worth it.
It is. It is so worth it. I mean, and these are 25-year long relationships that I've been building for the majority of my life, but they are like family to me. And so you whatever you put your energy into, you get back. So if I'm not putting my energy into that, then how can I expect my friends to show up for me in that same way? So
and have they been like all on board with all of your transitions, your personal growth? I mean, you have just come so far. Even, wouldn't you say, in all those categories you're describing, it wasn't just your physical, but in your spiritual, your mental, all of it. So I'm curious if those long friendships have come alongside and celebrated with you in those growth lifetime things that have happened, or if that's also been challenging.
Absolutely, yeah. So I am very, very lucky to say that I have had support. There has been a couple relationships that have not been as supportive, but for the most part, I've been really, really lucky with the amazing relationships that I do have and the love and the support that they've shown me through this transition.
That's awesome. I mean, it's a big deal, right?
Oh, yeah.
To be like, okay, you walked away from a lot.
Yes.
to do this with Justin, but
Yep.
I see how happy you guys are doing it, and it's just so cool. I mean, this morning, I should tell everybody, we went to the gym together, and I did my first like official, really hardcore strength training workout.
Yep, and you killed it.
Thank you. I don't know about that, but I had a really great time, and just even your both of your belief in me to say, hey, like these are some of the fitness goals that I have in that category of physical strength. I feel very strong in my other categories, but the physical strength one, you've totally come alongside and said, I actually can see it. I can believe that this could happen, and your belief has helped my mental state, just to say, like, actually, it's possible. Mm-hmm. It is possible. So, I will talk more about that, I think, in Justin's episode. But no, I was going to say, so friendships you've maintained, and you don't, in your one night, do you sometimes go out with people, or do you more just catch up on the phone?
I have. So we're new to Miami. It hasn't even been a year yet.
Okay.
I've been slowly making some friendships. So there's absolutely some nights where I will go out and do that. But running a business is exhausting. So oftentimes on that one night, I just want to sit, chill, catch up with a friend. So I would say that's typically.
Yeah. And I think friendship can look like totally not just going out to eat.
Right.
I think that's something that a lot of people and entrepreneurs especially need to remind themselves, that they don't have to just always have a lunch with someone or have a dinner. Like I've been just telling my friends that want to hang out, I'm like, yeah, let's go on a walk.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, if your time is 11, I know that might be your lunchtime for you, but like, I really don't want to just sit at a restaurant for an hour. That's a precious hour for me. Let's walk while we talk.
Absolutely.
And so that's been kind of fun to just creatively come up with other ways to spend time together.
It's so true. And even when I was still living in New York and I did have a lot of friends there, we would go to a workout class together and grab a cup of coffee after, or go to Chipotle and grab a salad or something like that after. It doesn't always have to be about the dinner, the drinking, that kind of stuff. And then obviously when you have friends all over the country, I mean, I have friends literally all over the country. I even have a few in Europe. It's about just creating that safe space to connect with my friends on not just a, hey, how was your day? But how are you? Like, really, how are you doing? What's going on in your life? I want to know what's going on in your life. I'm here to create that space, and vice versa. Because that is so important.
You do it so well. Like when you ask me, how are you? I really want to tell you the truth. I don't want to just like, oh, I'm good. You know, like with most people, I just don't think they can handle the truth.
Yeah.
You know, but when you ask me, I really believe that about you, Alyse. When you say, how are you? I can see that you really want to know. So I feel myself like completely melting and becoming truly vulnerable. And I'm like, oh no, what am I about to tell Alyse? Like, what do I tell her? Cause like, if she really wants to know, you know, there's more. And I love that about you though. Cause you just look into someone's eyes and you're very intentional about saying, how are you? How are you feeling right now? And it's not just for a quick answer. I really, truly feel like you're ready to listen.
Oh, thank you.
That's a really special quality.
Yeah. And I do believe that's how real relationships are built, is through the real stuff, right? When you go past the surface stuff and you talk about, what are you struggling with? How's your heart today?
Yeah. Yep. Zone 2. We always talk about that here. We're like, okay, well, you know, you can't really go to zone 3 if you don't start in zone 1, which is the casual, hey, isn't the weather nice today, and all of that. And then zone 2 is kind of like getting a little bit deeper. And then zone 3 is where you really do a heart swap, is what we call it, where it's an exchange of how you're really doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I love that. Well, we have a tradition here, Alyse. So I think you know I got your favorite drink order today, because one of our traditions is to have our guests tell us their favorite drink, any drink in the world. And so we ordered that drink for you. And so let's pull them out and you tell us what your favorite drink is and when you started drinking it, why you love it, and then we're going to try it.
All right. So we are drinking a double shot cappuccino with almond milk.
Okay.
So it's my favorite drink because I lived in Italy. When I was in college, I lived there for a semester. And it is, to this day, I've been a lot of places in the world. It is still my favorite place in the whole wide world.
Where in Italy?
I lived in Milan, but I traveled all over Italy. And it was just, I think I always say, I feel like I should have been born like Italian or Latina or something like that. There's a side of me that feels very, very connected to that type of culture.
Yes.
And so for me, whenever I order coffee, this is my favorite drink because it just brings me right back to a place where I feel so connected to myself. And so, yeah, I wanted to share that with you today.
Okay, I love that. Okay, well, I'm going to try it and then we'll do some cheers, okay?
All right. What are your thoughts?
Nice. Nice. I'm trying to wonder what the ratio is of coffee to milk. Is it more like a latte situation where it's a lot of milk with a little bit of espresso?
So that's why I do 2 shots.
So that it's a little less.
Yes.
Yeah, I like it. It's smooth. And it's very good espresso. Do you like the espresso?
Really good.
Okay, well, I want to say cheers with you. Thanks for being on the show. Cheers.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So again, you guys, if you liked today's episode, and I'm sure you did, please subscribe, like, share with your friends. We'd love to have you back on another episode of the Something New Show. Have a good day. Bye. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to the show, rate, review, and share with a friend. Also, follow the Something New Show on Instagram and Facebook. If you want a fuller experience, watch the show on YouTube to help you create a life worth celebrating.